This is Analog Spectrum. Before you get all judgmental, sure, sometimes they record while drunk, but everyone knows that alcohol is a mental lubricant for podcasting.
All right, we're up and running. This is Analog Spectrum. This is Tony, and I'm here with Doug, and Heath is still with us. And we just got done doing the podcast where we talked about sequels. Now we're going to basically switch it up and talk about Hollywood. Now I titled this video "Holly Woke." I struggle with that because, Doug and I have mentioned this multiple times. We don't want to be controversial. We don't want to make things political, but we have in past podcasts made comments about how we don't like the current path on Hollywood. I think that's worth discussing. And I did want Heath here to talk about it because I just don't want the two old guys that are kind of at the front of this podcast just bitching at each other for an hour about Hollywood. I want multiple
Let's get a third
opinions.
Perspective. Yeah.
Let's get a third perspective that's probably identical to ours. Thanks for joining us, Heath. So,
Thanks for the confirmation bias.
But no, I mean, we were just talking offline. We're right now there's a lot of stuff going on in society. We have the Bud Light boycott that's rolling out, and we'll probably put a pin in that for right now. But yeah, I think maybe just kind of starting out this conversation. I don't have anything planned or scripted for this at all. But I know a while ago, Heath, I was talking to Angie, and she may have even talked to you about this, is that, I started noticing, this is probably maybe 10 or 12 years ago, that every time I saw an advertisement, in that advertisement, if there was a man and a woman, the man always kind of played, the husband was always kind of a schleb, right? He was always the kind of, he was unmasculine. Right? Yeah, he was always the butt of the joke that always kind of, strip away his masculinity. And that's kind of where it all kind of started with this. I think,
Tony, that was all the way back to the 80s.
Sure.
Like we were seeing that in the mid 80s. Right. And I don't have any specific examples, but I could find them if somebody was to push me. Don't push me. Don't push me, Tony. But,
I'm not gonna.
But you
I'm not
gonna. but we've talked about that before. That thing, and it's right. So I don't know.
I think, and there's
I feel like. Are you guys talking? We're talking about like commercials or movies,
just in general. Yeah. So, and I think also like one thing I think there's just so much here, that we could probably do a whole podcast, several episodes just on this because I think that I think Hollywood has always kind of felt this desire to kind of push the envelope, and Hollywood has always had kind of a mindset and a political position going back probably to God knows the 50s and 60s, definitely going into the 70s, and these things have always kind of found their way into the entertainment. And I think like you can look at like All in the Family or shows like that early on, that there was definitely kind of an agenda, but I think in a way the agenda was kind of enveloped in some pretty significant and substantial and positive entertainment. And we've kind of moved into a place where a lot of that, that it's become much more towards the forefront of our entertainment, like where we just see a lot of kind of messaging and it's difficult to process. But I'll also kind of say that, like when somebody will say to me, I watch a movie, because there's no doubt you go back to we were talking earlier about in the previous podcast about Bedtime Story. You've got these two white guys, and they basically are movies back then in the 60s and 70s. Everybody was white, and everybody was a certain way, and so forth. And so there's definitely probably a need for more representation, but it seems like the pendulum has just swung so hard in a certain direction where it's just hard not to wonder what exactly is going on. I guess and I kind of leave it at that.
Well, and I think that there's some of that stuff is good, right? Like, I mean, for a lot of people looking for roles in movies, there just weren't roles, right? And so, right. Look at a movie like Crazy Rich Asians, where they had a it was very unique. It was a great movie, and it was made entirely by an entire Asian cast, right? I mean, there weren't any white people in that movie, which I thought was, I thought that was cool because it's, gave Asian actors good, solid, fun roles to play that they would, that they would want to be in. And so I think maybe that is maybe one example where it was a positive thing. And I think that's good. You get more, and also like the Star Wars recently having some of the roles played by different actors of different races that would have beforehand been all white, pretty much.
Right.
So, I don't think that part of it's bad, but I do have where I have a problem is the way the stories are told sometimes, and how PC we've made things, and how we steer away from things like All in the Family, and where we don't want to trigger people because we're being too hard this way or that way. But I also think that that's not very real, because look, when the three of us are sitting around shooting the shit, we talk a certain way, and then when you portray that in a movie, if you don't portray it in the way it it's actually going down, then it's not real.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also you mentioned All in the Family, which is kind of interesting, is that, the and it's a great, and I'm glad you kind of pivoted off of that because the way Archie Bunker was, he was clearly the antagonist in that, right? He was the individual that was
my granddad.
Yeah, but okay. So, and to say that he was your granddad, there were things about Archie Bunker, while he was clearly a racist and he struggled with so much. He was still he still had positive traits. He loved his wife. He loved his daughter. He loved his family.
He held his son-in-law accountable.
Yeah, exactly. And they ended up chucking Meathead under the bus too, by the way. Yeah. So, but in later seasons, but he, nowadays when you see, that white male in a show, he's got they make sure that he's got no redeeming quality. Like he is strictly he is the focus of ire, and to give him anything that would elevate him above, being the biggest bad guy. Would that be like
Modern Family?
Yeah. Well, Modern Family's, I've watched it recently. Is it still, it was actually really good.
It's a great show.
Yeah. So, but, what do you think, Doug?
Well, I think to have a serious discussion about this, the first thing that you have to do is define roles, right? So what is the role of Hollywood? What is the role of the advertising business? What do they do for us in society? And I would say arguably Hollywood is there for entertainment, right? And that doesn't mean that it's trivial. That doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that it's not real. Like Heath said, it's make believe, right? And sometimes the stories that we tell through movies, because it's my firm belief that stories are literally what makes us human, right? So going back to the days of cavemen, I could imagine a time when one caveman was telling another caveman a story about how he escaped the T-Rex in whatever grunting language they may have used. And that really became a way to convey information, right, back and forth between each other to help you survive. That was really what it was about in the early days of communication, I would imagine. Then we develop language and all of that, and you go on and on. Now we're at a point in society where those stories can be used to entertain us. They can make us laugh, cry, whatever. But most of the time, there needs to be a point to it, right? There needs to be some kind of a message that the audience can kind of resonate with, and whether that is, Rosebud, right? That whole story of Citizen Kane, the idea that he lost his childhood and he went through all of the riches and all that, and none of that shit was important to him except for Rosebud. That's what he remembered on his deathbed. Poignant story, right? Makes a point. And so nowadays, what I see, kind of like what you were talking about, Tony, is there is very clear, very strong messaging, but it's pointed at a very small minority of society. And I think that's where the disconnect starts to happen, because I don't relate. I don't relate to a lot of the stories that are out now. And like you were saying, Heath, the way that they're being told, it just doesn't resonate with me. So Maverick, well, it's kind of the last movie I can think of that I was willing to pay money and go sit at a theater and buy $8 popcorn for. I haven't seen the trailer for a film since then that I would be like, yeah, I'll go watch that. But maybe other people are. Am I wrong? I like it. Maybe it's like the. No, we're not going to dive into the Bud Light commercial conversation, but maybe there's a point to that, right? Maybe the demographic is shifting so rapidly, and Hollywood's just ahead of the curve. Maybe that's what it is. And we're 2-3 years from now, we're going to be all white guys sitting around going, I don't get that shit. Maybe we're doing that already.
How much the box office doesn't the box office doesn't put
they're
that
losing
forward.
Money, right?
Yeah, they're losing money. Yeah.
So that's where all of a sudden we start to have a problem, because to me, if they were making money, then we should shut up because they're doing the right thing. But they need to, it's like politics. You got to do stupid shit to get elected so you can implement the change that you believe in, right? And it's the same with Hollywood. You got to make money so you can make the movies that you want to make. And sometimes you don't make the greatest movies.
But I do think, to your point, I think we're talking about our reaction to this change after, because for us, for the longest time, the stories were told from our perspective, I guess.
Okay, sure, I buy that.
So we're reacting to that, right? I mean, this is our reaction because it's changed. It's not the way it was before. But I also think, Hollywood, when you talk about like big blockbuster movies, and the success and financial success of those now versus say 10, 20 years ago, some of that has to do, a lot of that just has to do with the whole paradigm shift to streaming. And, now they're making episodic shows on streaming services like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and everything. So that's taken over. That's where people are telling the stories now. They're not, aside from, I think Tony was right when he pointed out, or sorry, Doug, when you pointed out Maverick.
Tony was wrong as
yeah,
fuck.
Tony's always wrong. Yeah, that's a given. That's a given on this show.
Maverick stands out
because that
was.
Yeah. sorry.
Maverick no, it's all good. Maverick was the last blockbuster movie that I went to in a theater. I mean, there hasn't been anything.
Well, to that point, I mean, kind of. How box office is an indicator, and I do agree that like streaming plays a huge part in this, Heath. I think and there has been kind of a shift in the way people consume their entertainment. But Maverick, which was just, and you saw Maverick. I know Heath and Doug and I talked about it. It was just cotton candy, popcorn, awesome. But had no agenda whatsoever. There were strong characters throughout. Irregardless of demographic. Didn't matter what they were. What color their skin was and what sex they were or what gender they identified with, and you just and again it was just an amazing movie. But there is this thing
sentimental.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. By the way, Doug did not like the Iceman part. I loved it personally. So
no, I didn't like it at all. But whatever.
So serious.
It's all good. No, we talked.
I felt
about
bad.
it.
I know it's in the Maverick podcast, but I really felt bad for him.
Yeah, definitely.
I felt like it was exposing him at his worst, but. I guess it got him another movie role. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's definitely movies, and again, I don't have any browser opened up with somebody's webpage, but you can kind of just go down the list, like we talked about Terminator Genesis, or not Genesis, but like Dark Fate or the Harley Quinn movie. All these movies, they would interview, and I think Hollywood has this bubble where they think they can say, and that's another thing too. Social media is like fucked Hollywood all up, man. I think social media has done all kinds of damage. Yeah. But and what I mean is like there was a time where actors and actresses in Hollywood they were almost like royalty, and now they'll tweet or they'll put something out on Instagram or whatnot, and you have this kind of extremely divided fan base out there, and you may be trying to communicate to a certain component of your fan base, and you basically alienate the other part of that. It's just best not to tweet or do anything like that. But with that said, these people that would put these movies out, they would say things thinking they were being edgy, cutting edge, or really putting forward their product, and it would just they would burn the bridge. I have no doubt that had an impact on the box office in certain movies, and also like movies nowadays, they're because they're trying to do certain things. I feel like it just makes movies extremely predictable. Like I know, like you can tell me, have you seen, like, for example, we use the Harley Quinn movie that came out. I knew exactly what that movie was going to be about before I ever watched it. There was nothing in that movie.
Formula.
Yeah, very formulaic. And I knew that the bad guy, for example, and let's uncork this. I knew the bad guy was going to be white. I knew he was going to be a male. I knew he was going to be stupid. You know what I mean? I knew that they were going to be able to best him without any issue. I knew the women were going to be super strong. I knew that they were going to be more than a match for anybody they came up against. And and Doug and I talk about this quite often. The heroes in these movies, they have no arc. They nobody's ever going to get the better of them at all during the movie because they're never going to be rescued. And so it's predictable. It's not entertaining, and I don't think I'm alone in that thought process. So yeah. So I'm done. I'm off my soapbox.
I think so. So again, there's you talked about quite a few elements in there, and getting off of the element of production, right? So when we talk about making a blockbuster movie like a Maverick or one of those, I mean, that's an immense challenge. It's like I was saying, somebody wants you to make a viral video. It's hard, and I give those guys credit for the effort that they put in, and there's so many elements that go into it, right? And the one wild card, or out of several, is people's ego. So whoever is funding this thing wants to have their representation in some way, shape, or form, right? They don't just give you money. Here's $300 million to go make a movie, right? They want some say-so in there. So, producers have to deal with all of that stuff. They have to deal with the actors' egos. They have to deal with the production problems, right? And so on and so on. But outside of all of that, the first thing you do is find a good script. And I think that's one of the places that we're struggling right now is the writers that are writing some of these things. I'm not in Hollywood. I don't know, but how many scripts get piled on somebody's desk and they look at them and go, yeah, nope, yeah, nope, yeah. And oh yeah, let's make this one, but let's change this to this. And so that whole process of creating the story to be made into a movie, I think, is one of the parts where we're falling down, because I feel like that's the same issue that we're having in the whole Bud Light issue, is that it's just there's not representative of a large audience. And this is one of the reasons that they're struggling at the box office, along with streaming. I totally buy that. That's definitely. Yeah.
And
but I would also, we love to go to the movies, man. It's an evening, because every time I go to the movies, we go to dinner first, right? You go to dinner and then you go to the movies and you buy the popcorn. So I'm out $80 if you go to the movies.
Yeah, we go to dinner. Sometimes we take our wives with us when we go.
Yeah, once in a while. Other times we take our girlfriends. So they're
like this talking the whole time. Yeah, right. So it's like.
Deadpool 4 is coming out.
Yeah,
honey, what do you think?
Yeah,
but I feel like I'm ranting a little bit. And I'm sorry, but I also think
that's what this podcast is for, isn't it?
It pretty much is, isn't it?
Big long Tony rant.
Yeah.
So, do you guys want to get in here? Anyway, but going back to what we talked about initially is I think there was because like you go back and look at movies in the 70s and 60s, they were white as shit and all that kind of stuff. So I get the fact that they did make some blaxploitation movies and so forth, but I do think there was a need for a pendulum swing. I just feel like it's gone too far. I think it's important to have representation, but I don't
even know. First of all, I don't even know if I would agree with that. And second of all, I don't even know how true that really is. Like, if, has anybody done the research? Yeah. Okay. So lots of the stars were white. But starting with Sidney Poitier, right? That pendulum already started to shift.
Sure.
He was the first black guy that had like a really big role, right? And then it started to shift from there. But there's plenty of plenty of stars that are multiracial and all of that. And then one other thing that I forgot to say earlier, I wanted to mention to your point, Heath, about perspective. That's, I think, the more important discussion. I think because whether the actors or actresses were white, for example, the spinoff from All in the Family was the Jeffersons, right? That was a black family, but it was told from a white perspective. They did not live like your average black family in the 70s, right? They lived in an upper class apartment, and George made lots of money and all of that. So that wasn't told from that perspective.
The audience they were trying to relate to was white.
Yeah, absolutely.
Largely.
So I think that's a more valuable discussion is what perspective are these films coming from and our entertainment? What perspective is it, rather than what color is the actor or the actress, or what nationality is the actor or the actress? I think that perspective is a more important discussion to have.
And I think also it comes down to the kind of roles for actors and actresses. You know, I mean,
but don't you think that's like wide open now? Don't you think like
I do, but I also think, you know, how many great roles are there for some of these leading actresses who turn 35, 40 years old, and then some of those roles kind of dry up.
But that's always been the case.
It's 100%. Yeah. But I mean, you know, that's something, whereas old aging, you know, you get Robert Redford and Clint Eastwood in their 80s, and there's shit. They could make a movie every 6 months. That has to do with their history, right? I think it has more to do with their history and their name recognition than it does the fact that they're a white guy. I mean, so for example, Oprah she could get a role tomorrow if she wanted one. Could be in anything. You know,
Maverick. She could have been Maverick.
She could have been Maverick.
It goes back to
I would watch that movie. I would freaking watch somebody
to make that movie.
I'm writing a screenplay right now.
Tell me you wouldn't watch the shit out of that movie.
But I mean, you were talking about the producers and you know, which is really the money. You know, so in order to fund a movie and to take a script and turn it into a movie and hire a cast and do all those things, you know, there's a lot of risk, financial risk involved, and they're going to go with the sure things, right? They're going to go with the stories that they know they can sell and make the movies they know they can.
So to that point, why are they faltering then? Why is there a producer that is willing to remake Little Mermaid and make the mermaid a black girl? What value does that add to us as entertainment? I mean, there is a segment of people that will go, hell yeah, I've been waiting for that to happen. But I think that's a small segment. So is that producer doing the math and figuring out like, okay, it's worth it. I'm going to make money if I make this.
Or are we just the people on the outside of that now? And they are smart and they are making money on it.
Well, okay, so my point is that's just like our last podcast. That's a remake, and that's already a risk, right? Mm-hmm. And then to change the nationality of the main character of this story is another risk on top of a risk. So I mean, again, I'm not saying that I'm right. What I'm saying is like, there's a producer that's willing to say, "Yep, I'm going to put up the money for this," and how is that? I'd be curious to know about the decision making behind it. That's all. And I'm not saying the movie's going to be good or bad or whatever. I'm indifferent to that. The point is that, you know, there's how many choices does that producer have to spend that money? Why did they choose to make that? And I think this is where it starts to go like, well, because it suits an agenda that person believes in. And
well, just real quick, I mean, you say that you're indifferent, but everybody needs to know that you do have a Little Mermaid tattoo.
I do. It's right there. It's right there. Oh, sorry.
On that note, I mean, I think there's certain things that have happened, and Hollywood's always going to run. I think Hollywood's always been somewhat ham-fisted about their approach to diversification, right? They you have producers who are probably look a lot like us, and they're kind of like, hey, let's, the kids are really digging that rock and roll now. Let's go ahead and put some rock and roll in this movie, and they don't really, they're not, their finger really isn't on the pulse.
But that's the natural bias thing that we all have, right?
But with that, I also think you talk about changing race on certain characters. I think one of the arguments about that was to make that because I mentioned this, and you said you had disagreed. I do think for the most part Hollywood up to a certain extent was mostly white. I think yes, there definitely was roles for people
Sure.
but I think there's that argument that we need to have more.
That was
characters.
100%.
What's that?
I mean, 100%.
Yeah.
You go back and you see any American Indian was a guy with
It's
it was a
Italian.
white guy with right. And I mean that's how it was done for ages.
But don't you miss it? No.
No, but so, on a serious note, Bill, when did that start to change, though, is what we have to ask.
But I guess what I was saying was that there is this kind of need or desire to make, or I think there's a belief that there's a need for there to be characters that are relatable to a larger demographic. Like, in other words, like
100% agree with that. I agree with that 100%. But
right.
I mean, again, and I'm just using this as an example, and maybe it's a poor example, but why change the nationality of the Little Mermaid? What value does that bring? There are other good, solid, uplifting characters that haven't yet even been exposed, and then that identity,
I get it. Yeah.
But that identity at that point can then belong to that particular character instead of what's the cultural appropriation thing? I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I mean something like it's what it feels like, and it's like it doesn't make sense to me.
I think a lot of it has to do with if you were a minority growing up and you were used to seeing Disney movies, and the princess Ariel is always portrayed as a white girl, then and those stories were always told and the characters were always made up of white actors and actresses,
right?
Then from your perspective, you want to see that story told with African American. I mean, I think that's where, and kids and growing up and seeing those roles, because I think that's important. There's some importance to that.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Let me pause you there for a second. Is it not more valuable to create a new character that represents that audience? Like, why does it have to be a Little Mermaid? That's okay. Here's the problem.
I get it, because I think that's because we're just not creative enough.
There you go. I've just discovered the problem. The problem is they're freaking lazy, and they're not coming up with new shit. They're stealing old shit. And I don't mean they as in, I'm talking about in general. Like, how many movies are just terrible, terrible remakes of previous movies?
How many more Rocky movies do we have to watch?
Exactly. And Terminator movies, right?
Three more. We're going to have three more. So,
three more. I told you there's another Terminator movie coming.
But I think to your point, you're asking why would they remake? I think it's because, look, we've told this story and we know this is a good story. Right. So we're going to repackage it and sell it off again.
Sure.
And I think the risk is lower with that than it would be if, hey, I've got this new thing we don't know.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
And so I think that's where the producers are like, shit, this was a money-making vehicle for us before. Sure. Let's trot this thing back out there with a new cast.
And I do think that again, Hollywood's is a one-sided vacuum. I think if you go into a writer's room or find a group of writers, I don't think there's any kind of. I think we talk about the need for diversification and the need for representation. I doubt in most rooms where they're coming up with new IPs and so forth that there's a lot of different. Unique thought in that. I think most individuals have kind of a very similar thought. So just almost like we keep hearkening back to the Budweiser situation, the Bud Light thing. I think, there wasn't that voice that said, I think it's a bad idea. I don't think it was somebody that said, let's just use, and Disney, oh my gosh. I mean, Disney's probably at the tip of the spear. I don't think, there's people in Disney that'll say, yes, we have all this property, this very deep, resource of stories and characters and so forth. Let's just use what we got. And nobody's saying, I think that's a bad idea. I think that everybody's just not kind of on board with it. Yeah. So.
Right. Maybe I think maybe what we're searching for. Tell me if I'm wrong on this. Maybe what we're searching for is either truth in the language that we're using or a different language. So in other words, the language that we keep hearing is inclusion, but the three of us being middle-aged white guys are excluded. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're going to include frickin' everybody, right? I'm totally down for that. Like,
well, and also,
you guys, you guys were all in the military, and I know you guys had the same experience I did. You get to a ship, you get thrown into a berthing area, and guess what? There's Christians, there's Muslims, there's black guys, there's white guys, there's Puerto Ricans, and you live with it, and you learn to cope, and you learn to tolerate. And then guess what? Who's the least racist person out of all of us? All of us, right? Because we all learn that we're different, and we all have
exposure.
Value. Pardon? Yeah, exposure.
I think it's exposure, right? It's
absolutely.
You. I think when you see other cultures and religions, and you're around people, you realize people are all pretty similar.
Yeah.
When you get right down to it.
Yeah, man. We want to feed our families. We want to be happy. And in Mexico, we celebrate Fiesta. In America, we celebrate the 4th of July and whatever else, right? And so when the language is thrown around as inclusion and diversification and all of that, like, it needs to be legitimately inclusive. I don't have any issues with that whatsoever, but it can't be sort of inclusive,
Well, and I will say, they're never going to make a movie that is inclusive to all, but it does seem like that most everything that's coming out of Hollywood right now is targeted towards a certain demographic, right? In other words, like you were just talking about us as who we are. Like, the last movie that spoke to us was Maverick. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everything else is I don't really seem to have well, maybe that's not completely true. There's definitely
John Wick 4.
Dude, don't even get him started on John Wick. Don't get his ass started.
What are you talking about? What does this come from? Where I don't like John Wick? I
don't know how
John Wick was great, and then they just many other.
Yeah, you just gotta accept it for what it is.
So the first candy was good, but then after that, it's like the same. Same old Hollywood trick, right? They're just milking it. Yeah. So that was my only problem.
The best way possible, man. And John Wick 3 was amazing.
I dig Keanu Reeves.
Guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
But even there's definitely things like pop up on Netflix, and I'm pleasantly surprised by them, but it does seem to be fewer and far between. And like I said, I think there's kind of an agenda, and it's hard to work around that for me. So
yeah. And I'm okay with a movie not being perfectly suited and made specifically for me. And I'll give you the perfect example of that. I was just sharing this with somebody the other day. I think I told you about it, Tony. Enola Holmes. I think it's on Netflix, and it's about Sherlock Holmes's little sister. Mm-hmm. That was a feminist movie. Like, from an outsider's perspective, it was all the guys were neutered in there, with the exception of Henry Cavill as Sherlock Holmes. He was clever. And he did fight a little bit, but he held his own. But in any other Sherlock Holmes movie, he would be the star, right? So, but I get it. This wasn't about him, so they downplayed
Henry Cavill.
him a little
Okay,
bit.
I'm sorry. You said
Henry Cavill, Superman.
I'm sorry.
Right?
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The Witcher.
Yeah. But anyway, so the point is that as you sit through that whole film, it turns into this really feminist movement, right? Mom was blowing up parts of London to, move the suffragette movement forward and all that kind of stuff. But it was woven into the story in such a way that it was actually entertaining. I enjoyed it. It wasn't terrible. So I tolerated that and didn't even dislike it. I even recommend it to people. So cool. That's great. But in lesser made films, or films that push that agenda too hard without the quality that's involved in the rest of the film, I think that starts to bug me. Because I did think that was just a really well made, and the actress was great. I thought she was wonderful.
Yeah, the kids like that one.
Yeah.
Well,
what about kind of an exception? I was thinking of Pennyworth.
I love Pennyworth.
Yeah, but I thought that one was, maybe. Didn't I don't know that was more told from our perspective.
Yes,
it was.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because Doug and I did an episode on Pennyworth, by the way, season 1.
Oh, you did? Okay. I love it. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
The first season was great, I thought, and the second season started going down. I couldn't even get through it. So
it got a little bit.
Yeah. The first season was amazing. What's her name? Beth.
Beth.
She was great.
Her character.
And again, super strong female character, very nuanced.
Loved it.
definitely had an arc. Crazy.
But crazy.
Yeah.
You're all right, Dux. I love it.
Yes.
So that Mancunian accent, just loved it.
I was going to say that was a pretty good Irish accent you did there.
Yeah. Manchestering. Then I messed it up.
See, that was the joke. Yeah, sorry. I went too fast for you there.
No, right over my head.
Well, that's Heath's DNA, by the way. So he's English as hell, man. So, but right.
Well, yeah. Mom, Mom's from Liverpool.
Yep. Liverpool.
Well,
I do have another bone to pick, though, and this is an example of what we're talking about, the Hollywood wokeness thing. Did either of you guys watch The Last of Us?
Yes.
Did you play the game?
First couple episodes.
No.
Okay, so in the game, there's a character. The two of these, they kept pretty damn close to the story of the game. Right. Even some of the shots, the camera angles, all of that was just like the game. They did a great job in most of it. In the game, you get to a certain point where you meet this character, and he's a grumpy old bastard. And you play, for the most part of the game, you play that teenage girl. Right. And so there's part in the game where the two guys are talking. And again, this is a perspective shift, right? You're the teenage girl and you're roaming around and the guy keeps yelling at you, don't touch that, don't touch that. And he's a prepper and all that kind of stuff. And you end up stealing a comic book from him. He's got some comic books. You end up stealing a comic book. And that comes in later in the game because it's one of the things you have to do is collect comic books throughout this, the little Easter eggs, In the film, they gave that guy, he was a short part of this game, and they gave that guy an entire episode, and they made him gay, and they were very, very obtuse about, or that's not the right word, overt.
I remember this episode.
Yeah, they showed this guy laying in bed getting ready for gay sex, and I'm like, wait a minute, man, that is too far off the path. Right. That was nowhere you could say that, he had a great relationship with this dude that he rescued and that's all, and leave it. But it just went so damn far. It was like, I almost stopped watching the series. I gave it another episode and they kind of got back onto the story of the game. And so I kept watching, but it's that kind of stuff that's like, come on, dude, why? Is there a need for that? I don't get it.
Well, and you mentioned that like
tell me I'm wrong.
I don't know. I think
there's much more of that though.
Yeah, I was about ready to say I watch Ted Lasso on Apple TV. Have you watched Ted Lasso? Yeah, which is pretty good. Yep. It's a kind of a comedy, kind of a dramedy more than anything and it's interesting because it's based on a commercial they did for Heath's a huge soccer fan, about football in England, and it was a commercial where they took I forget the actor's name, but he played a college football coach. And he went over to England to coach soccer, right? And so it was this kind of fish out of water thing. And it was actually, the commercials are very funny. And they ended up making a TV series out of this, right? And the TV series is actually pretty good. I'm watching it now. But, in season 3 or season 4 now, they introduced a gay character right out of the gate. And one of the main characters who was a female is now experimenting with being a lesbian. And you're kind of like, that is a lot to unpack. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like why would this character who's otherwise heterosexual suddenly decide to be gay, And I just think that, again, I think it's less about story and more about agenda. So that's what
I do. I think so, but I also think it's 3 middle-aged white guys reacting to shit that's going on and perspective. I do think there's
I don't disagree.
It's just it's so pervasive, and almost you can pick any show and that this type of stuff. But I do the episode that Doug brought up on The Last of Us was really wow. I remember watching that same episode and being like, wow, they're really shoving this in my face,
Yeah.
And I mean, they're obviously trying to make a very hard point about this.
Yeah, and to me, it's like it's not even about gay. I don't care.
Right.
Like Philadelphia, for example, right, with Tom Hanks and what's his face. It was part of the story, and it made sense. I watched it. I enjoyed the movie. It was great. But this was nowhere, anywhere because I was I was into that game. That game was great, man. The story was the thing I kept telling Tony about. You got to play it. You got to play this awesome story. And then all of a sudden this pops in. I'm like, what the shit?
Well, it's like they got to check that box.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we get away from that? How do we go back to, because I mean, I'm not talking about segregating entertainment, but the point is how we can have shows with and about gay people, with and about white people, with and about Puerto Ricans and blacks, and there can be some where all that stuff is mixed in, but the shit has to make sense, man. You gotta it's the story is the game.
You gotta understand, Heath. In that game you play a teenage girl, and Doug likes to pretend he's a teenage girl.
I was into it. Who do you think got Dylan Mulvaney started, motherfucker?
Doug doesn't leave that shit alone. I mean, sometimes I go there and I go, my God, there's a lot of Hello Kitty shit in your house, bro. Yeah. A lot of Hello Kitty shit. And he's like, I don't want to talk about it.
That's Tony's white guy reacting.
That's Tony's tramp stamp.
Yeah.
Hey man, that thing hurt. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, I think that's my real frustration is that they're sacrificing potentially awesome stories, good entertainment for things that are
it's agenda. Yeah,
for agenda, but it's transient and it's thin and it's not going to hold up. They're doing themselves and everybody involved in the project a disservice, I think. Right. That's what I think. But
like I do agree also with what he said is that this is three white guys bitching about it.
Yeah.
So
I also I think
deny that. Yeah.
We don't know each other well, Doug, but in listening to you and in listening to in other podcasts, I think you're a much more critical viewer than maybe I am. Like I watch stuff and I can go in for John Wick 4 and suspend. Right. I can turn my brain off and just watch a bunch of action, and not really overthink it. And so I think there's some things that appeal to me just because I'm kind of a dumbass watching some of this stuff.
No, it's that suspension of disbelief. That's I mean, that's what moviegoers, that's what they seek, I think my bar for that is pretty high because I critically think a lot and it's hard, but I tell you what, when a movie has the ability to do that for me, I'm all in, man. I love it.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah. Well, I talk to a lot of people, you talk about movies with, and there are a lot of times where people get more critically into what was done right, what was done wrong, and those sorts of things. And I think then there's schmucks like me who I just really like that Javier Bardem putting that that pneumatic
the
cow brain,
the nail gun, or whatever thing was.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think what's also hard about this is that, like, when we talk about what you're talking about, like in Last of Us, it really, it very much could have been put in there for artistic reasons, and they really were trying to deliver a certain concept or message and so forth. But what's hard is when things like this, when you start witnessing it, it's hard to not see things. You know what I mean? It's hard not to look at something and say, is this a true effort to move the story forward, or is it just an opportunity to insert something in there to deliver?
And that's kind of my point, because they could have made that point. They could have made the point that they made it an entire episode. They could have made that in a 3-minute segment. Mm-hmm. And it would have, then the story could have carried on, but it was really like you hit the pause button and it wasn't even like a backstory. It was just like some weird side
segue.
Yeah.
For a whole episode.
And then at the end, they were dead by the time that the hero got there, and they just looted their stuff and left. And I'm like, that's again a complete travesty from the actual story, because they had to negotiate with this guy in the story in the game, and it was a little tense. I mean, that was one of the moments in the game as a player where you were like, oh shit, is this dude gonna, I'm gonna have to kill him? It's a game, he's not gonna kill you, but so you're thinking I'm gonna have to blow this dude away now, because she was just flirting with being able to get guns and stuff, as her character arc kind of went up. But yeah, so I was bothered by that, and like Tony said, once you kind of recognize it, it's hard not to see it. But yeah, I don't know. But I will say, to your point, Heath, I do look at things critically, but I'm seeking out the things that can trap me and get me, and really let me fall into the movie. And La Femme Nikita, like we mentioned last time, that was one of them. Oh my gosh, man. That
well,
one
also
authentic.
Yeah. Also, to your point though, is like, we are, a character, for me to embrace a character, it doesn't have to be a middle-aged white guy. It could be there's all kinds of characters all kinds of characters that are not middle-aged white guys or white guys that I'm completely on board with. I mean, one of my favorite movies ever is Aliens, and that's Sigourney Weaver, right? I mean, or Terminator, in Terminator 2, Sarah Connor, amazing.
Sarah Connor.
Yeah, amazing. But I
mean, like what was that movie with the two little kids? It's a famous. I think it won Oscars, where he dies at the end because he was allergic to bees. The cute little blonde kid.
Oh, my girl.
My girl, yeah.
My girl. That's right.
Yeah, that's another one. That's like
Anna Chomsky.
Yeah,
was that who that was?
Chomsky. Yeah.
Good.
Look at you,
man. I know.
Golly, right out of nowhere, man. Boom.
Sorry. Is that weird?
No, dude. He just went full Rain Man on us.
Yeah, right?
236.
But all those, like, and I'm with you. To me, it's about the character. It's about the story, and it's about the, can you relate to that character? And then to your point, Heath, maybe it is that I can't relate to a black Little Mermaid, and that's why I'm not on board with it. But I don't see it that way. I see it as they're ripping off a story and they're stealing it and changing it just to make a few bucks and to try to make some kind of a point. But I don't know.
Well, also, I think the race swapping of Little Mermaid comes at the tail end of a lot of that happening too. So after a little while, you're kind of like, wow, I know that there's a kind of this conspiracy where, if you look at like a lot of like white redheaded characters in Hollywood have been race swapped, and and there's a list out there of like 40 or so characters that have all been gone from like a white redheaded male or female to a race swapped character. And so if you're at kind of the tail end of this, after a little while, you're kind of like, wow, that's a lot, So yeah.
I have a great example. Listen, I don't know if you guys read the books. Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. It's a fantasy series. Mm-mm. Well, they just remade, or they made it into a show on Hulu or Netflix.
Right. And it was Prime. It was on Prime, wasn't it?
Or was that Prime? Yeah, Prime. Yeah. And it was a really long-winded fantasy series, like kind of Lord of the Rings type story, with a ton of characters. Really, really cool series of books. But when I read the books, the characters were all sort of white, Middle Earthy type characters, right? Mm-hmm. In the show that they've done on Amazon, it's all African American actors, and so they took, and it was like, and watching it, and it's really well done. And I thought, they doing a good job on the show and everything. I like it, but I remember looking at that, going, "Oh, that's cool. It's just different." And I didn't see. I guess when I read the books, I didn't read the books, and that wasn't what I pictured in my mind.
Right.
But now they're retelling that story, and I remember thinking, oh, they've obviously, this is a vehicle for a different cast,
right?
Different people to get into, and it's cool. I don't have a problem with it, but it's just not the way the books. I don't know. That's not how I read it in my mind.
Right. But I guess the first question, it goes too deep, but, did they describe the characters as being white in the book?
Not really. No.
So then that's fair game then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's totally fine. Yeah. And it's and the thing that I can think of is I read, and Tony's gonna okay, just get ready because Tony's gonna bust my balls on this one. But
get ready.
Here he comes. Just get ready, Heath. Here, you've known him long enough to you won't be surprised by this. But I read and really, really liked The Bridges of Madison County. I thought that was a great book.
I know.
And when I was reading that book, Clint Eastwood, man, that was the guy that was in the book, and it comes out and it's Richard Gere. I'm like, totally terrible casting, man. Should not have been. Sorry, reversed.
No, it was Nick Nolte, right?
No. It was
Richard Gere, or maybe I'm thinking of a different one.
It was reversed. I was thinking Richard Gere, and they cast Clint Eastwood as the role. Yeah, and I was thinking terrible casting. Terrible. And I know they're both white guys. That's not the point. The point is that I get it that you tell the story how you think the story should be told, and especially if you're the guy spending the money, right? Totally fine with that. But
Richard Gere passed.
Yeah, so
what?
On the story. He passed on that story.
Oh, he passed on the role. I thought you meant he died. I'm like, what? I didn't hear that.
Well, and also, I mean, they cast what's her name for the woman in there?
Meryl Streep.
Yeah, and Doug saw himself as the woman.
I did. I tried out for that role. Man. Tony beat me to the last call.
I couldn't let that shit go. Sorry.
Meryl Streep beat him, so.
That's funny.
But anyway, yeah. So at the end of the day, it's just like anything. It's just like politics, just like whatever. We don't have the answers, right? That's the real bottom line. But it is a little bit aggravating that to me that I get agendas crammed down my throat for one, and then for two, like I can't find good movies. I miss that. I miss like really good films to watch.
Yeah. Well, also one thing you did mention I thought was that I kind of wanted to come back around. You mentioned at the very beginning that, and I think it's an important point in this whole, Hollywood transition was you mentioned that there's a lot of political correctness too. That is a real issue, and that transcends movies because you look at comedy and so forth.
Society.
Yeah. So I mean, he talked
I
about
find
that.
interesting. Have you guys noticed this? Tell me, have you noticed that comedians are getting edgier now than they were like 5 years ago? And I think this is the pushback from all of this PC stuff, right? They're finally going like, well, you can't do PC comedy. It's just not funny, right? You have to offend people.
Fucking God bless Bill Burr, man. The guy.
That guy's beautiful. Funny as shit.
Yeah, he is, dude. Yeah. I still to this day, and it's like he could take something that if I said it would definitely offend, but he says it and it's so succinct but so funny. Like when he was talking about like the WNBA, it's like it's not successful, but it's for women. Why do you want me to watch it? It's for women. Let women should be watching the sport if they feel like it's meant for. I'm thinking he's right. He's exactly right. So
remember that whole flap with what's that chick's name from the U.S. national team, the soccer team?
Rapinoe.
Yep. And they were all pissed off because women weren't making as much as men in the soccer and all that. Well, look at your audience. I mean, this is an audience-driven financial avenue, right? You get a bigger audience, you get a bigger paycheck. That's what it's about. It's not about male, female. It's like nobody's watching it. That's why your paycheck is not big. It doesn't have to do with you being.
I had an hour-long conversation at work with a colleague the other day about that. The very thing.
What was it about?
Well, it was about WNBA and women's soccer and the money and all this. And I was like, we both agreed, they're just not very compelling to watch. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's just
people
if
watch, then sponsors would get on board and there would be more money available. That's the way the system works.
Yeah. And so, it's unfortunate, but it's entertainment,
Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
I tell you, I'm in. You're much more focused on sports than Doug and I. Neither one of us are big watchers of the sport. But I tell you, I've been to like a Spurs game, and holy shit, man, it is the greatest thing. Like Melanie back when she worked for St. Mary's, she got like almost like courtside seats one time, and. I don't watch basketball, and it was like being at a 3-ring circus. It was amazing. I could see why people are so drawn towards it, right? So that's what you're up against. If you want to entertain people, you need that level of excitement. So it's
right. Here we are now. Entertain us. That demand, that beast of an audience demands to be fed at all times, and.
And when you get into like soccer, and soccer fandom, and going like you'll watch games in England, it's crazy
chaos.
People, it is. I mean, it's an experience.
Yeah, I went to a rugby game in South Africa, and when South Africa was playing New Zealand, and that's their arch rivals, and it was madness. It was madness.
I bet.
Yeah. So but I think at the end of the day, I mean. I think Tony and I have spoken about this in the last few weeks. Even is like, yeah, at some point we're just going to be those old codgers in a recliner, flipping through the channels, going, "Oh, son of a bitch!" You just be grunting about shit. Yeah,
cold bottle of Heidelberg in our hand,
drinking our Bud Lights, and just like whatever. Yeah.
Well, and I tell you, that's actually kind of the end point or the end result of all this is everything we're saying and the way I feel. It's hard for me not to take a step back and realize it's through a 56-year-old white man's heterosexual man's brain, right? I know there's individuals out there that have significantly different opinions than I do, and I definitely don't feel that I'm right. I don't feel that I'm correct or right. It's just the way I feel, so.
Right.
Yeah.
But the point that I was making about us being in the military is we learned tolerance, and that's all I'm asking in return. Oh, yeah. That's all I'm asking in return is tolerate me, and I'll tolerate you, and live and let live, man. That's it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe don't make every white guy a stupid bad guy. You know what I mean? In every movie. Yeah. So
that'd be nice. But we get to vote with our dollars, right? I mean, you go watch the movie or you don't go watch the movie. You subscribe to Netflix or you don't subscribe to Netflix. That's your choice. And so at the end of the day, the Hollywood and all advertisers, they're going to follow the money. They're going to follow the money.
100%. Yeah.
So vote with your dollars, and that's all you can do. That's all you can do, really. Yeah. Unless you want to go to Hollywood and start making movies and make whatever the hell you want.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it.
Let's not. So
that screenplay of Oprah.
Yeah, even better. We could make Oprah John Wick.
Blade Runner with Oprah.
I think there's a series of Oprah movies that are remakes. Go back on the previous reboots.
That's a remake. We didn't mention, dude.
The Oprah identity.
We can cast Tony in the color purple.
Which, by the way, is one of my favorite colors. So
nice shirt, by the way, Tony.
Yeah, I like
Is that a Galaga?
Yeah, it's Galaga. Yes, yeah. So. But I actually wear the shirt and I do get people going like, great shirt. It's like I didn't make it,
man.
But so but anyway,
I telling you got good taste. That's all.
Well, that soundtrack stuck in my head.
Galaga.
Galaga.
Well, we're right at 55 minutes. This is a good one. This is interesting. Okay. So I'll tell you right now, anybody that's listening towards the end, understand that this is just our opinion. I don't want anybody coming after.
Let's throw the disclaimers out, because the truth is, and this is hand on heart, this is as true as I can make it. I'm not trying to piss anybody off. It's just a discussion. It's an open discussion, and it's more questions than answers. We don't have the answers, but it's a part of our current day culture, isn't it? I mean, all of this stuff.
Exactly. So, yeah. But all right, with that said, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope everybody has a great...
Let me do one thing. Before we go.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. We're going to start with Heath, because we like to put our guests on the spot. Final thoughts on Holly Woke.
Oh, man. Final thoughts. I'd like to see less of the box checking. For sure. But I have a feeling that we're going to get a steady diet of this stuff. I don't think it's changing. And I think we're just going to be bitching and moaning about it.
All right.
Yep. And I think you're right. I think it's I think we're kind of in that world right now. I think Hollywood always kind of lags a little bit behind. I think there's kind of, and I think there's always kind of an agenda. But I hope that maybe the box office does lead to a certain way. I do not think we need more old white guy representation. I just want good stories, and I want just to be entertained. So, what about you?
Took the words out of my mouth, Tony. That's it.
Entertain me.
Yep. Give me something good and cool and fun to watch.
Yeah,
blow shit up.
Give me over Oprah, but in a Maverick movie, and I'm gonna go see it twice, definitely, in freaking the whole like IMAX. That's what I want.
And buy popcorn.
I'll buy $8 popcorn all day long. All right.
And a 3 gallon, what's that Buc-ee's place that you guys
Buc-ee's. Yeah. Buc-ee's all day long, man. Did we go to Buc-ee's? I can't remember.
No, I think we drove by a Buc-ee's. Yeah.
We need to
I want you to know that you're one of very few people that have traveled with Tony and actually drove past a Buc-ee's without stopping.
That's a damn truth.
I love the fact that Buc-ee's exists, and it might be the most Texas thing in Texas.
There's
pretty much.
Yeah, it's Buc-ee's and HEB. You pretty much got Texas wrapped up.
Oh yeah,
yep, exactly.
Yeah, and driving with Tony. That's part of Texas experience too.
Yeah. So and just to kind of close it out here, this is still going in the podcast. Heath currently is in Seattle. He's actually come down a few times, and Heath rode the Hotter Than Hell with me. And so did his wife. His wife has ridden the Hotter Than Hell with me, and we've been to Big Bend. Yeah, and your brother Ivan's ridden the Hotter Than Hell. So not 3 different times, but twice.
Different.
And and we went out to Big Bend, and actually Heath's going to be back for sure. And next time he comes back,
I want to do that again. That chili cook-off, we got to go do that again.
Oh
That's
God,
fun.
Yeah. So we'll
and
maybe
Big Bend.
Yeah. Next time you come back, maybe we'll talk a little bit about Big Bend. So
sweet. Yeah, you got to come to my store when you come back because I got a Texas store as well.
Yeah.
Now how far south are you? Where are you in relation?
I'm actually northwest of Tony, about 45 minutes or an hour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that up towards Austin? Is my geography
Austin's kind of straight north, we're more west. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Straight out the I-10, basically, towards your house.
Yeah. 45 minutes closer to Seattle than Tony is.
That's right.
That's pretty much it.
I got a pinpoint. Yeah.
All right. We'll leave it there. Everybody, I hope you have a great day. Another podcast, another outro. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so let's keep this one short. Like, share, subscribe, maybe ring a bell. I don't know what that'll do for you, but hey, sounds awesome. Go to our webpage, check out some old podcasts we've done. They're all really good. I'm sure you'll like every one of them. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook. Send me an email, send me a note. Send me a show idea. Maybe you want to join us on one of these podcasts. That's always an option. Finally, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an awesome trip, and we'll see you again next time.